And welcome back, Fourth and Long fans. It's your footy correspondent, Coach Donnie Hess here, back with another AFLW round review. We've taken a week off for semis because two games is just a little low. So I thought, let's talk semis and prelims with a very, very special guest of the podcast, Constant and USAFL Nuffy, just like me, Footy Nuffy, just like me, Mr. Brian Barris. Brian, how are you doing, sir? Have you decompressed from all the Philadelphia sports that you have had to attend over the last several weeks?
Oh God, I'm going to need some therapy sessions after all of that. I mean, let's review. I got a chance to go to all three World Series games that were in Philadelphia. Game three was fantastic. It was like home runs, and I've never heard a stadium that loud. And then I turn around and game four, the Phillies get no hit. It's only the second no hitter in the 100 plus year history of the World Series. And then nothing happens in game five. And then at the end of that, I'm an avid fan of the Philadelphia Union soccer team, and they were up 3-2 with 5 minutes to go in the game, and Gareth bleeping Bale, he's ripped my heart out twice in 17 days. So yeah, it's been nuts. And of course, as well, Donnie, you and I are both kind of recovering from the USAFL Nationals, which were held in October. Of goodness, about 6 weeks. Has it really been 6 weeks since Nationals? Five,
It's
six
just
weeks
flown
since
by,
Nationals?
doesn't it?
It really has, but yeah, I mean it's another great season that we had, and I want to touch very very briefly, if I can, before we get underway, just how great the women's competitions were. You got a chance to call a couple of games. Unfortunately, we didn't get a chance to call game together. I'll have to talk to the guy who makes the schedule. Uh,
Inside joke. That's him. That's him. So
that's me.
I had to
Um,
laugh. Have to laugh about that. No, I absolutely loved it. I got to call a lot of the Division Two women, which I thought again, it's even being intermixed squads. I think the footy and the skill level is getting better and better. I absolutely enjoyed it. Pete Holden is an absolute legend. Absolutely love that guy so much. I loved being able to be able to call games with him, and it was so fantastic. Again, this tournament is just incredible. It is a footy lover's dream. It is five fields of footy all the time. Absolutely fantastic. But just incredible. And the women's game is growing. I mean, seven full sides this year in the Divi One side. Yes, San Francisco with another championship, but Minnesota playing really, really well in this particular tournament. I was really impressed with Minnesota this year. So I'm hoping more and more to come. And trust me, I am working on it here in Des Moines. I've put it into our AGM to talk about it. I want to try to get a women's side together here in Des Moines. I think it would be incredible to get some women here. Unfortunately, Emily Rice has had a lot of scheduling issues, and some of our females that have played in previous seasons have had issues with family, shall we say. I won't go any further than that. So
mhm.
I'm hoping we can get the women's program back up and going, because I think every single club in the USAFL, if they could get a chance to get a women's side, I think would only help these clubs survive and grow here over here in the States.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to remember that like a lot of the clubs that really have bounced back. And Minnesota's a great example. But we weren't even sure, and I don't even think they were even sure that they were going to get enough for Division One squad. And just for folks that aren't familiar, there's two divisions at the USAFL Nationals on the women's side. One of them is for full teams, and what Dottie alluded to in Division Two, they're essentially combination sides. Basically, if a team doesn't have enough to field a full, in this case, we were able to do 18 aside in the women's Division One. If they're not able to do that, then they combine, and we lovingly refer to it as the Frankenstein division. But everyone was assuming Minnesota really only got a chance to play one full game this season, and they were seeded out of the seven teams. They were seeded in fifth, and they ended up winning their pool, going undefeated at 3-0, and eventually fell to the six-time national champion San Francisco Iron Maidens. But I think that's the thing, is that we're seeing a lot of clubs and we're seeing a lot of these programs that didn't really have much. I mean, Austin is probably the biggest story, because Austin for many last couple of years only had two women. This year they brought nine. And considering how successful they've been, especially on the men's side, when they've have seven national championships, they've been really wanting to get a women's side together, and they've got a number of women who have come over from other clubs who really are putting it together. So next year, I'm definitely looking forward to it. There's talk of there's still needs to be confirmed, but talk of the Parallel Cup on the women's side and the Transatlantic Cup of that might be merging into one in a sense. The USA possibly playing Canada and Great Britain. We're not sure where and when just yet. There's rumors that might be down in Fort Lauderdale, where the last Parallel Cup for both the men and the women were held. Of course, the right now the International Cup in 2024, and it hasn't been confirmed yet. It's still speculation, but that's so it's still really exciting, and especially for those of us here in the States and aficionados of the women's game who want to see the game grow domestically.
Yeah, 100%. So let's go from the USA part. Let's go over to the AFLW, because we have two semis and two prelims that have happened since our last podcast. Really quickly, sir. The two semifinal games. What were your thoughts on them? And did it go kind of the way you thought they would?
I think so. We start with Richmond and North, and I think Richmond got exactly what they deserved out of this, because I know all the talk was surrounding the venue and the lack of, there was the calls to move the game over to Icon Park so that more people would come and watch. And Brendan Gale and the Tigers were very staunch. They wanted to keep their quote unquote home field advantage. And of course, the Kangaroos have never lost at Punt Road to Richmond, and form held here, and they kicked 11 goals in the contest. I mean, Richmond, I think, played them tight, especially for the better part of the opening part of the match. Of course, they both had three goals at the end of at quarter time, but North really kind of showed their class and ended up kicking away. So the fact that North ended up winning, even though again that game was played, where it was one thing, and then Adelaide holding serve at home. It is interesting to see. I mean, I think a lot of people were thinking that this might be Collingwood's year against an Adelaide team that still had some question marks. But the fact that the Crows ended up coming out of this one winners, and in what was a really, I mean, this was it was a pretty significant tug of war. In fact, if memory serves, this is actually the game with the where that was played in horrendous conditions,
Mm-hmm.
played during probably shouldn't have even been played on the day. There was it was biblical, I would say, for the first quarter and a half, and the fact that conditions like that are the great equalizer, and Adelaide was able to be the best of the two teams.
Well, it was definitely the semifinals were definitely interesting. It was the tale of ask and thou shalt receive moments, especially with that one. We'll break that down even more, and then really quickly, just your initial thoughts on the preliminary final, because I'll say it this: status quo. Because for me, the two teams I expected to win won. Were they exactly the way I was expecting? Maybe not, but honestly, I think we have a grand final. I think that everybody was expecting.
I think so too. The Adelaide, I think a lot of people were expecting really the heir to kind of go out of the team with Aaron Phillips departing, even with all of the stars that they have. And I think that it's amazing to me how much the Lions, with all of the changes that have occurred over the last couple of years, I think they've ended up being one of the two most consistent teams, Adelaide being the other one. They've been one of the most consistent teams at that. So the fact that they were able to win in the way that they were is and really convincing from game to end, from beginning to end. I mean, they won by 23 points, and honestly, I don't think the game was that close. So there was that. Then you have Melbourne, who I think really are hungry after last season and the season before. And it's interesting to see about when you think about the Kangaroos. when they came into the league in 2019 and when they snapped up all these players, when they snapped up Jazzy Gardner, when they snapped up Emma Kearney, and when they snapped up all these other players from all these existing teams, these not only like stars, these elite players, there was kind of this question of, well, what are like expansion teams aren't supposed to be this successful. And I kind of feel like they have gone as far as they have, but they always seem to stumble at that final hurdle, or they stumble maybe even like a little bit beforehand. So as much talent as they have, it's got to be disappointing to see them make as run as they have. And honestly, the best season they had was in 2020, and unfortunately, we never really got to see what the outcome of that was. But I know Melbourne. I think Melbourne is probably, as good as they are from top to bottom. I think they're built as well, probably the best built team in the competition. And the fact that they were able to win the way that they were, I don't think was a surprise.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. So let's break down these games really quickly because we really dove into them really quick. Let's go back to semifinals again. As we said, Richmond kind of pays for wanting to play at home. North Melbourne get the win 74-38, a 36-point win. And this was one of those where some people were a little bit of shocked. It didn't surprise me because if you look at the draw that they had at the end of the season, this was a different team. Rennie was back. Rennie was back, and Emma Carney both played in this semifinal game. And Emma Carney, even at 75% and on one leg, still made an impact on this game. And Jazzy Garner got loose. The tag worked in the draw, but the tag did not work in this game. And when Jazzy gets going, the rest of this North Melbourne machine at times can get going even more. Tigers, they're a scrappy bunch. I kept hearing so many people say, well, they didn't play too many finals teams, and the finals teams they did, they lost. Well, you can only beat who you play in this
Yeah.
10-game season. So it's one of those, you can't beat up the Tigers for doing that. They've got a scrappy, they're still a young team. And again, there's still the fact that Harriet Cordner is still to come back on this team. You've got another year of experience. You've got a lot of youngsters again. Ellie McKenzie is still very young. Mon Conti is still growing. Grace Egan just joined this team. So this is this Richmond team is one of the teams I think you keep an eye on for the next couple of seasons, because as they grow and they mature and they gel, this team's only gonna get better. Teams like North Melbourne and Adelaide, I think, are on the descent. I think this
Mhm.
Richmond team could be stepping into those places over these next couple of seasons. As long as they can stay healthy and keep this team together, this is a Richmond team that has a very bright future. When you've got Mon Conti, who can be a league best and fairest easily with how good she is with footy in hand, there is a lot to like, especially down at Punt Road.
I think they've been the most promising team, or one of the most promising teams since they've come into the league, and they seem to be doing everything right. The fact that they've picked up the Hosking twins as well. I mean, I think they, as good as they've played, I think that we've still to see the best of them. Um, you mentioned that North and Adelaide are on the downswing, and I think that's right. And the key is how well Richmond have built, and how what players they can bring in, not just they might be able to pick in terms of free agency and whatnot, but who they can get, they can pick up in the draft, and who can they're the sort of club that when they do clear that next hurdle, when they do get to the point where they can, finish in the top four, where they can even finish, just in the top eight and win a game, I think that will build a lot of confidence for them. And they can have that sustained success. And so it'll come. But I think it might be another year or two down the road, but it's going to come. And when it does, I think they'll have sustained success for at least a couple of seasons.
I 100% agree. I think this was the booster that they needed. I mean, the first couple of seasons they struggled. Again, no wins the first year. They get 3, and then they get 7 this year. I mean, this is a huge boost up for this team. It brings a lot of confidence. And again, a full off season, and Mon Conti is fully concentrated on footy right now. I think that's only going to make this Richmond Tigers. And then I gotta say this, and I know I think I saw I haven't seen the AFLW awards. I believe she made all Australian. Elise Sheeran, coming out of nowhere, has been the pickup free agent of the season with how well she has played this season. You cannot deny that. So if they can keep her in Tigers colors, which she's a Sydney girl, so I bet GWS and Sydney may make a phone call. But if she can stay in Tigers colors, that's going to make this Tigers team very, very good for the future. As we said, let's jump over to Unley Oval, where again, as you said, Crows win by 12. But this was a game I agree with. I've heard a few podcasts and I agree with this. If you look at the first quarter and then you look at the other three, you can tell that the weather that came through after the first quarter really affected this game. It became a stalemate because, I mean, as you saw on it, there were spots on the ground. There was ponds on the ground. Like, one of the most fascinating things about watching this game was every single time somebody was tackled or the footy went into the ponds, and all of the women crashing into the pads to get the footy. You could hear a groan in the stands, like, oh, because you felt horrible because they'd come up and they're sopping wet. And I'm just like that has got to be the most uncomfortable thing, because if that happened at halftime, you can exchange your jumper. That's okay. You can get at least a dry jumper. But if you do it in the third quarter when you've only got 6 minutes, you're staying in that soaking wet jumper for the
Mm-hmm.
rest of the game. So it's like, for the women to compete in that, I give them my kudos 100%. But the Crows got a nice lead after the first quarter, and then it was an arm wrestle the rest of the game. I mean, you could almost say the Crows having a better first quarter really is what won them this game, because it was relatively even. It was relatively an arm wrestle the rest of the game, at least how I saw it.
Yeah, I think you're right in that effect, and you can, I mean, to the point with the weather and the field conditions, I think you can kind of maybe, you can be of two minds of this. On one hand, you could say, oh, it's great footy weather, and oh, it's
Mhm.
real footy, and you think of all the highlights and all the stories that you hear about the men's game, 50, 60, 70 years ago, where the game field would get muddy and they would still be playing. I think I think elite athletes shouldn't be playing on fields where the drainage is that poor, but that's that you can just chuck that on the heap of complaints that I have in terms of in terms of how these athletes are treated. I think you're absolutely right. It did change the game completely, and it did unfortunately completely bog things down to the point where, yeah, there really wasn't much anybody can do. And to your point, Donnie, like after that first quarter, only two goals were kicked. Each team only kicked one goal.
Mhm.
It's a shame that Collingwood didn't that had to play, and actually, it's a shame both teams had to play in that. It's a shame that Collingwood season kind of ended in an extraordinary circumstance. But both teams are still playing in that condition. It's not like it it outwardly affects one team or another in an
Mhm.
obtuse way. It is what it is. But you're absolutely right. I think the downpour and really the aftermath really affected the rest of the game, and that is where Adelaide's quick start paid off for him.
Yeah, definitely. But and it's not like the skills dropped away. I think the skills were still relatively good. It was just, as they said, with the absolutely horrendous conditions, almost dropped a four-letter word I probably should never say on the podcast. It really changed the game. It really became that arm wrestle in the midfield. There weren't a lot of inside 50s. When they did come, it was usually repelled. Both these defenses for both these teams are very, very solid. So if you take away the speed element, you take away the ability to bomb it over the top and outrun it, it really kind of evened this game out. So there really wasn't a ton between the two teams after that first quarter. So it's hard to argue again. Does it stink that a season ends that way? Absolutely. But I think this was one of those where Collingwood, they kept surviving in a few ways. They're a great team. It's scary to think that they get their best two midfielders coming back after this season. Look at this Collingwood next year. You add Bree Davy and Britt Benici back onto this team, and with the depth that they've kind of built a little bit, they're going to be a much different team next season. So I think this was kind of get through this year. Now you get Britt and Bree coming back next year. Keep an eye out for this Crows team, because they're going to do some damage next year when you get those two superstars back. So All righty, so we jump from semis to prelims. So we stay with the Crows here. Now the Crows go up to Metricon Stadium, and as you kind of said, the Lions they're just so good. And this was as one person said statistically, this was almost a carbon copy of their home and away game. Kind of even in the first quarter. Second quarter, Brisbane gets just blitzes the Adelaide Crows. There's not much they can do. And in the third and fourth quarter, the Crows just try to play catch up. They try, but the Lions are just too good. There's so much depth, there's so much skill, there's so much speed, and they just keep coming. Their fitness is elite. There was no slowing down of this Brisbane Lions team. And the Crows, you could tell halfway through the fourth quarter, they were just trying to survive. They were trying to get to the final horn. And again, that is a horrible feeling as a coach. I've seen my players do it when you're in the middle of the fourth quarter, you're absolutely exhausted, you need to do something, and there's just no reserves in the tank. It was a great performance by the Lions again, showing why they have been one of the best teams this entire season. The Crows, again, you just ran into a buzzsaw. You ran into the Lions at the worst possible time. They're absolutely at top nick. They look absolutely fantastic. They are so primed, ready for a grand final. There's nothing for the Crows to lower their heads on. Chelsea Randall, superstar, and especially with everything that they had to deal with, losing a former teammate, Heather Anderson, again,
Yeah.
a huge thoughts and prayers and good vibes sent to Heather Anderson's family from the podcast. A terrible tragedy, and whether it affected Adelaide or not, I'm not going to stay. I'm not going to say because I don't think that's my place to say that at all. Incredible performance, the emotion there for them to go out and to honor Heather with the pink boot, with the pink shoelaces, and I think Hatchard had her hair dyed pink. So a great tribute to her. They played their guts out. There's nothing that they should lower their heads on. Just too good were the Lions.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I think it just it seemed like it was very much a roller coaster, 7 days, because they're coming off this euphoria of having won the struggle, and then to hear that news, which it must be said, it really reached far beyond the Crows. I mean, Heather was one of those women who played going all the way back to the pre AFLW um, days in the exhibition. And I remember, we talk about the pink helmet. For those of you who I'm sure most know but don't, the reason she wore it was that her mother, who was visually impaired, this way she could pick out which one Heather was, because the helmet stood out. And yeah, I think at the end of the day, Brisbane was always, I think, the better side. And when you get out gold 4-0 in the second quarter, and I mean, it was a blitz. It was really, and as well as Adelaide played. I think you're right, Donnie. As well as Adelaide played, and as well as Chelsea Randall played, and as well as Ed Marinoff played as she normally did, and Ann Hatchard got her touches. You know, when you've got, especially the snipers on the forward line, when you have Taylor, when you have a Davidson, when you have Courtney Hodder, when you have Jesse Wardlaw, and they each kick braces, they each kick 2 goals. It really makes it difficult, and it really kind of can deflate even for a team that has had the success and the experience that the Crows did. I think this was just the Lions' day, and so and I think they also could smell the carrot of getting a chance to host the grand final, which of course we'll talk in a little bit. But it, it it's I think this was, it would have been I don't know that it would have been an upset, but I think Adelaide kind of raising, winning, had they come away with this game, I think it would have definitely kind of raised a couple of eyebrows in terms of like how powerful they are, in the terms of we talk about like dynasties and such, and sustained efforts in this league. But hats off to Brisbane, because they played extremely well. And like you said, I think the Crows, they have absolutely nothing to be ashamed of. I think a lot of people were, I think, as much as they were, I think there were more than a few people that were writing them off when Aaron Phillips left. And it was almost like, let's put it this way: if they would have won the grand final, you would think of when Wayne Gretzky left the Oilers, and the Oilers went on to win a Stanley Cup two seasons later. I'm sure everybody in Australia who's not hockey fans are kind of being like, huh? But sports. But I think that, like you said, it was a really difficult week for them, and I think the fact that they went out there and I don't think they disgraced themselves one bit.
No, not at all. Again, the Crows are a great team. The only one and only thing that I do state a little bit is I don't think this is the same experienced team because they've had an infusion of youth. They've got some younger players. They don't have that experienced team. Again, several players have left. Whether it's the total of losses has affected them that much, but again, they've had some infusion of youth. They're going to go through a little bit of a tempest. We'll have to see how they do. But I also think that teams like Brisbane, Melbourne, Richmond, North Melbourne are starting to catch up. I think Adelaide is not the vastly better side like they were some of the first few seasons. I think you're starting to get 4, 5, 6, 7 teams that can all win a flag going into the start of the year, and then it all just kind of depends. So we move over to the other prelim final, which I look at this final score and I almost kind of shake my head a little bit because okay, Melbourne wins by 17 points, doubling up 33-16. But if you watch this game, it almost tells a different story because this was more about North Melbourne's inability to capitalize because they went inside 50 so many times and just Melbourne's stingy, miserly defense finds a way to get intercept marks and repel it. North Melbourne, and I don't want to use a pun, but I'm going to use it. They're going to rue this. They're really going to rue this because I think they cost themselves a chance to win this game more than Melbourne beating
I think you're right. I see what you did there. I get that reference.
them.
Um, That's so rude. No, I think Melbourne. I think it seemed like I'll tell you who was there. She wasn't in it, but she did a lot of the 1%. She wasn't in the top, but Alyssa Bannon.
Mhm.
Really, it seemed like she showed up just about everywhere, especially defensively. She would really challenge for the play, and um, yeah, I think like you said, they had all these extra chances, and I watched. I watched a fair bit of this, and it is amazing to me. Like they would always, especially when things were tight in the third quarter. I mean, it was 19 to what is that? 19 to 16. Look at me do math. And heading into that fourth quarter, and it's like, man, they should be tied. They should be ahead. And then in the fourth quarter, they just kicked away to the demons. And I mean, they're an elite team. They're a team that they coming off of a season which it seems like a long time ago, but it's just a few short months ago that they had finally climbed that, taken that next step. But they were kind of in the same way that the Kangaroos were. They seemed like they would always get to that certain point and then stumble. They're the ones who now we expect them to make this run. We expect them to go all the way. Karen Paxman was her normal self, and how considering how well she's played, it amazes me how she always, especially on these big games, she always does as well as she had. Lily Mithen did well. Um, you know, Daisy was Daisy, and Horde, Fitzsimmons, and Mithen, and everybody else. I think it really, really just kind of showed how deep it is. And we talk about how deep the Lions are. This team has done well, and even Taylor Harris was a presence before she left the game. She is there. You have to honor the fact that she's a presence in the forward line, and she has said it sounds like she's going to be there for the grand final. She'll be back there again.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see how at what percentage she is because that shoulder injury just it looked like it was going to cost her the rest of the game, and then she comes back later in the game, plays and even had like an overhead mark, and she was like, and I don't think the physios could have held her out of that game. Like they would have literally had to physically hold her down to be able to get her off the field or to keep her from going on. So again, I think she'll be good. Wouldn't be surprised if she probably takes a jab just to kind of numb it a little bit to try to be able to get through it. I think she'll be okay. Hoping that it won't cause her permanent damage, especially with her stellar boxing career. But again, Taylor Harris is an absolute beast. I got to go back to it. Daisy putting the dagger in that game. Now, Kate Hoare, I think, put the game away with her goal earlier. But Daisy Pierce's goal was just the creme de la creme. It was the icing on the proverbial win cake. and just her class to be able to get it through a tackle, get through it, snap it, and put it dead center. Absolutely fantastic. The legend that is Daisy Pierce. Just fantastic. A great way to end that one. So we are at it, sir. We are in it. Grand final, one game left in season 7 2.0. So I'm gonna skip burning questions because we gotta break this game down, but I want to break it down just the tiniest bit different than sometimes. I want to go line by line and I want to break down how this game kind of matches up. I'm very interested to see how it goes. In your opinion, sir, let's put these two times, let's stand them together. Who do you think has the better D core, the defensive core going into this game?
I think it's the Melbourne. Again, just especially the way that they saw off the um, North so easily and nearly effortlessly. It seemed like they always found they had the nose for the ball whenever it was in the air. They had good contests. They played incredibly well. That isn't to say that the Lions don't have a good defensive line, but I really feel that if you're asking me who to give the edge to, I think it would be Melbourne.
All right. And the funny thing about it is, I would agree with you, but I think it's almost because the Brisbane Lions defense is almost, they're kind of like the forgotten stepchild. Like
Mhm.
they don't have like Kate Lutkins is the one that everybody talks about, especially coming back from her ACL a little bit quicker than most AFLW players. But I mean, Marie Conan, Campbell, Greta or Nat Grider. I mean, they have just contributors. Phoebe Monahan.
Mhm.
They're you wouldn't know them if they pop out of your Wheaties, but they're just good. They do what they need to do. They're not flashy. They get it to their superstars in their midfield: Ali Anderson, Emily Bates, Isabella Dawes, and then up front again, they're absolutely insane. But I agree with you. By name stature, Libby Bursch pops out at you. Shelly Heath is always one that everybody talks about. So I think overall I would agree that you would get the stature edge to Melbourne, but
Mhm.
Brisbane is just they just get everything done with their kind of quiet group of solid players. So I'll give the D's, but it's very, very close. We jump to it, the star-studded section of the ground, the midfield. No, let's take the rucks out for a bit. We'll talk about the rucks here in just a second. Just the midfielders. Who do you think has the edge here?
I mean, it's amazing to think about like how many you look at Randall, you look at Hatchard, and again there's a lot of these names that jump out at you. Anne Hatchard is gonna get her touches. I feel like every time that they play, and I'm talking about the wrong team. I'm sorry.
I
Um,
was like Adelaide popped into a grand final
I
between
I
Brisbane
don't
and
I don't
Melbourne.
I don't know why I was thinking of Adelaide. I'm sorry. Let's try that again.
Rewind.
Rewind. I was looking at the wrong team. Melbourne. I think that Melbourne has you look at these two, you look at Melbourne and you look at Brisbane. Melbourne is again, and you look at the amount of work that Daisy Pierce does in the middle of the ground, and you look at Paxman and you look at Lampard and you look at all these players about how well they do when they get touches. But then you look at how well the Lions are and how well they control the play, how well they spread the play. I think you sort of have to give again to the demons, but I think just because of how well they pick players out, they pick things out, and they're able to control things going forward. So I would give the edge to Melbourne.
See, and for me, I'm with you, but more is because I think if you look at it last year before Liv Purcell and Eliza West kind of exploded into this midfield. I mean, think about it that Karen Paxman's been playing the wing a lot this year. She's been almost in going forward because they don't need her in the midfield.
Yeah,
Lily Mithen has been able to go out there. I mean, and then you throw Alyssa Bannon can go forward. She can go into the midfield. There's impact players on this midfield for the Demons. And again, it's the depth of midfielder for Brisbane because you've got so many. I mean, Emily Bates was your best and fairest last year. This year she doesn't win it, but her teammate Ali Anderson does. So how
yeah.
how insane is that in 2 seasons in 1 year two Brisbane midfielders win best and fairest. Absolutely fantastic. Brisbane just does it with depth. I mean, Orla O'Dwyer out on the wing
Oh
is
yeah,
she's a matchup nightmare because no matter who you put on her, she can outrun you, she can out physical you, she gets the ball in, she can kick goals when she needs to, and when you can feed it to the animal in the four-headed monster that is Brisbane's forward line, a
yeah,
lot of the statistics really would you would think would go to Brisbane, but like I said, Liza West and Olivia Purcell coming into this Melbourne midfield has made it so deep. It's just as deep as Brisbane's, and it's just as impactful on its day. I think this, for me, this is an even. I don't think there's a winner because I think on their day, depending on how the play goes, can affect how it goes. Can Melbourne get their run off their marks and get their handball game going, which then they can deliver it to Eden Zanka, Kate Hoare, and the forward line of and Taylor Harris when she takes her pack marks. Where Brisbane's kind of they're the scrappy kind of they want a chaos. They want to be able to tackle. They want to be able to get in it, and then they just want to go. They want a handball and they want to run. They want to get going. They want to tire you out by making you have to defend the entire ground. So I think this is one for me. This is even. I don't think there's an advantage either way because I think it depends on how the game goes, which that could be
yeah.
more tactically than I think it is on player personnel. So we jump to it. Well, let's go to the rucks because I think this is a fascinating. This is two different type of rucks that both are kind of similar, but yet different in many ways. Talia Hickey for the Brisbane Lions, Lauren Pierce with the occasional throw in of Taylor Harris into the ruck for the D's. I'm going to take this one. I think this is one where I think this is a situation where the D's can take an advantage because having two that can roll in there and make an impact. Lauren Pierce is just as good as another midfielder. She gets around the ground. She can make she marks the footy. She's great even below her knees. And Taylor Harris can pack mark anywhere, and she's got a booming kick. This is one of those places I think the D's do have a significant advantage. Talia Hickey's a great player. She gets around, she does great, but she doesn't make an impact as much as Lauren Pierce and Taylor Harris combined.
I think, yeah, that's absolutely right. And I think that the Demons generally, what you said, what you're saying is that they're a little bit more versatile. Rucks are tall. Rucks can be different options and whatnot, but they're the two of them. Between Pierce and Harris, they brings that little extra to the table, especially Harris. And here's the thing I've always said about Harris. You can talk about her football ability all you'd like, and admittedly in the last couple of years, I think she's done a lot better, and I think she's adjusted to it. But but she's a great athlete, and I think
Mm-hmm.
that's the thing. I think when you look at the two of them, I think Warren Pierce, and then again, as you said, when they're able to platoon Harris into that ruck, I think they have the edge because they're able to do more with the footy and they're a little bit more versatile, and not just go out and win the ruck and then tail the play. They're able to do more. So yeah, I'm with you. I think the D's have the advantage.
Well, and in the Brisbane Lions will bring in Taylor Smith, which is I mean she's serviceable, but she's not going to win a ton of tap outs. She comes in to give Hickey that break, whether coming off or resting forward. And then the other scary part is that you also have Eden Zanka who can come in and play
Yeah,
rock, and she's basically another midfielder again.
yeah.
She's been playing a lot forward this year, kicking a lot of goals. But if Harris can't play rock, Zanka can come in and you're not stepping down very much. You've still got
No,
a pack marking, but you've got another midfielder. She's got the tank to be able to go in the midfield. So I think the three-headed monster that potentially Melbourne can throw at Brisbane, it's going to be the tester. Can we see how it goes? And you got to remember, Liv Purcell and Taylor Harris did not play in that first matchup where Brisbane got the win down in Casey. So it'll be fascinating. Last but not least, this is going to be fun because this I'm fascinated to hear what you say. Who's got the better offense? Because both teams, in my opinion, have a Hydra par se on
yeah.
days of dangerous weapons up forward.
and they're entertaining. And the thing is not even so much are they entertaining, but they're also like think of how well they create chances. I mean, Dakota Davidson, I think is really just it's like you talk about the Hydra. I mean, she is very much a snake in that forward line. She's very slippery. She has her, she's tall too. So I think in terms of that, and then of course you've got Courtney Hodder, who is again, I mean, when she kicks goals, it's usually out of the top shelf. I mean, you're right. This is going to be very interesting, and I think, a key here is going to be contest. You talk about how well these forwards play. It isn't so much about who can contest the high marks and whatnot. It's about who can pick up the loose balls. A lot of these matches are about getting into the machine room and doing into the weight room and the machine room, the boiler room. Yeah, that's it. Uh, and doing the vocabulary. And we mentioned Taylor Harris. I think, a lot of the Lions players, I think they're good at picking up and creating something out of nothing, turning garbage into gold, so to speak. And that's where Davidson and Hodder and a lot of these forwards for the Lions have come in. Then you look at the Demons, and we mentioned Taylor. I mean, Taylor's a presence, and as athletic as she is, you have to honor her. You have to play her tight. Her height is something that gives them this extra that extra little nudge. And so I think that'll be the key. And will also be key as well as how much space they can open up to let their half forwards and their midfielders run on and maybe bomb it in and really kind of create chaos. I think the Lions would have the edge here but I think how well they play is going to determine on how well their midfield and how well their rovers can deliver them the footy, and then just simply creating those chances, winning those ground balls. I would have to give the edge to the Lions on that, but that's going to be where the game, I think, is won and lost, and where these chances are going to be, especially if it ends up being one of these low scoring arm wrestles, which it may not be. I think, you can conceivably, I think the scores will be in the 30s, if I had to take a guess. So we'll see what happens, but I give the forward line to the Lions.
By total overall depth and scariness, I would go with Brisbane, but there's just this consistency and this grounded in simplicity that is the Melbourne Z. I mean, again, you have Daisy Pierce has been playing forward, and you just never know which. And she's so sneaky. She's so good at being in just the right place at just the right time. And I honestly think this is going to come down to matchups in the defensive forwards. Who does Libby Birch take? Does Shelly Heath take Courtney Hodder, and can she take her out of the game? Because if you can take Hodder out in her crumbing ability off the marks, you can kind of take away Brisbane a little bit. Wardlaw and Dick and Dakota Davidson can mark the footy. I think there's enough height in the Melbourne defense that I think they can negate the advantage that they do in the air. The question will be is can you take away? And the other question is, does Zimmy Farkelson come back in? Because she
Yeah.
hasn't played in these last two games. And Greta Bodie is always as scary. So I agree with you. I think Brisbane, just because of the total number, because with Melbourne, Kate Hoare and Taylor Harris get a lot of the talk. Daisy a little bit too, but Alyssa
Mhm.
Bannon kind of does tend to go towards the midfield a little bit more. So she doesn't always get the number of goals, but when she does kick her goal, it's usually a fantastic one, and she's been very much a big game player. So gonna go with the Lions there, but I think this is a little bit closer than some people think when it comes to it. So this next one, and you can kind of do it how you want. Who do you think has the best intangibles? Who do you think has the best kind of grit player, or the player that you think could be the game changer? Because for me, it's Alyssa Bannon. I think
Yeah.
Alyssa Bannon is the X factor in this game. That if she can light up a game with one of her amazing runs or one of her exciting goals, I think it's going to give a ton of confidence to the D's. I like the D's in this one just because of her impact and then just their grit. They have been a tough team all season. They don't give up. I think the intangibles for me go to Melbourne.
I agree with you. I think another player who really inserted herself into the play was Blathan Mackin.
Yep.
The one of a number of the Irish women that have featured throughout the season, and I really like watching her play. She's very quick, and she racked up to this. I mean, she got 10 touches in the game the last weekend, and um you between her and between Bannon, and listen, the Lions have been, listen, both of these teams have been there before. I think, the Lions, especially since there are, a good number of players who remember winning the grand final, going into Adelaide and winning the grand final. Now they have an opportunity to host, in quotes, this championship game. And so I think that needs to be there too, is that there is this, they've been battle tested on the road within the last couple of years in this situation before. So I think that has to be it. But I'm with you. I think in terms of the players and the terms of the teams that could go on the road and do this, we saw Melbourne go to Adelaide last year, or I'm sorry, this past season, remembering, of course, forgetting, of course, that there's been 2 seasons this year,
2.0.
but 2.0, yes, Electric Boogaloo point oh. But I think you're absolutely right. I think they have the edge. I think in these little one percenters, and you mentioned Bannon and Mackin as well, and some of these other players, Maeve Chaplin, and I think is another one who fits in that role as well. I think that gives them a little bit of an edge. So I would give the edge to the D's.
Alrighty. So we've talked D, we've talked midfield, we've talked ruck, we've talked intangibles, we've talked offense. Let's get to it. We've only got one game to tip, but it is a biggie, and that is who is going to be raising a cup and flag at the end of this game. This game is being played in Springfield. And before we tip, there has been this is the second time during this final series that there is drama about the venue. And I was listening to a podcast. I was listening to a podcast, and it was very interesting because I mostly heard people complaining. It's like there's only 8,000 seats. Why can't they move it to Marvel where it had 12,000? Da da da. And I'm like, I 100% understand that. But as the AFL is kind of stamped in, especially as they did in the whole Richmond fiasco, and that was that in the AFLW, the clubs choose, where in the AFL men's, it's the AFL that choose the venue. It's the reason why the whole Geelong argument kind of got discussed after the Brendan Gale comments come out. So in this podcast, she brought it up is that the game at Icon Park between the Melbourne Roos and the Melbourne and the Roos with an Icon, and Icon has a almost 20,000 seat availability. How many people came to that game? Two Melbourne clubs in a preliminary final. 6,000. That was it. So I, I don't mean to kind of dissuade this argument about Springfield, but we need to stop because if you're only going to get 6,000 in a preliminary game in two Melbourne clubs, I really don't see where you have a lot of place to stand on to scream that this should be a Marvel, especially considering, as they said, the top team that makes the grand final gets to host. I understand this is a brand new venue. The girls have not played there. Brisbane has never played on this brand of grass. It literally got put down weeks ago, but that's where they want to play it. Yes, it's only 8,000. Yes, it sucks, but let's sell it out an 8,000 seat arena and then start building. I understand everybody's like, oh, grand finals has an average of 20,000. Yes, but you got to look at it. Adelaide one year had 50,000. That's going to skew numbers a little bit.
Yeah.
So I understand this argument. I really, really do. I understand people want to go, but you're going to take Brisbane's advantage away from them just to get more people. I understand, but I'm gonna say no. I'm gonna let them have it.
Yeah.
They'll sell it out. They'll get 8,000 people there. I don't think it's gonna affect who wins the game. I think it's gonna come down to the players on the field. I don't think weather's gonna change it. Let the game play. I just think this has been blown way out of proportion when again did Richmond have an argument? Did Richmond have an argument? Yes. 2,500. Yes. It's a little light, but at least they sold it out. All due respect, Melbourne and North Melbourne go over to Icon. They didn't get 12,000. They got half. So the AFLW, as much as some fans don't want to hear it, they're being proven right that you really can't argue about a bigger stadium if you're not going to get enough people to really fill it. So
Yeah.
thoughts?
My issue isn't necessarily with, so I agree with you in so far as Brisbane is the top seed. They're the host. And, it's unfortunate. And just to, I guess, put a bow on what you're saying, the match sold out in the tickets have already gone on sale. My understanding is that the match sold out in less than 10 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So, and there were people from Melbourne who, looking at the AFL subreddit, had actually bought flights to Brisbane before buying, basically in anticipation, and being able, thankfully, to secure tickets. And if you take out, and just I guess to go to what you were saying earlier, if you take out that Adelaide game where they had 53,000, the average comes down to about 15,000, which still roughly twice the size of the facility in Springfield. It's a hell of a town. Anyway, the
The
Simpsons
memes have been
reference,
bad.
they have
Oh my
been
God.
listen, if nothing, it was like, oh God, like, I bet you I'm going to go. That was the first thing I thought of was, wow, the Simpsons memes are going to flow here. And sure enough, that was the first thing with the admin was like, and here come the Simpsons memes. Um, the, the issue, I think, isn't necessarily, uh, I can't really blame the Lions, and I can't really blame the AFL for making this, for seeing this as a solution, because my beef, and I think really the ire should be more or less that this looks very much like a slap bang put together
Mhm.
situation, which unfortunately has been a hallmark of this particular season, and and honestly has gone back a little bit further because the men's season is not scheduled on the fly like this. And I feel that that AFLW, the AFL, was completely unprepared for this. They really wanted nothing more than to have the season right now where it is. They were like, let's get it done and we'll sort it out later. Everything will be fine. Maybe next year this isn't an issue. Maybe next year they'll be able to plan things where all of the venues that I think that's the key, is that next year they'll probably be able to identify these venues. I think, they'll be able to identify the GABA. They can identify Marvel, and if Marvel's not available, they can identify Icon. If let's say GWS or Sydney will win, then they can do. I think that's the key, is identify one venue in each state that can hold a grand final, and do it like now, like do it if the season starts up, next season starts up in August, do it in February, do it in March, get on top of it, so that we're not in this situation. Am I saying, I don't know how feasible it would be to block out other events from doing something here, but the AFL has to have some power. So that's the thing. I think this is just another example of how rushed and roughshod that the AFL has wanted to conducts things with when it comes to the women's competition. So I think them choosing this as the ultimate solution, it's not ideal. I'm sure they'd love to be playing at the GABA. Hell, I'm sure they'd love to be playing at Metricon. This is the situation that prevails. The Brisbane Lions have earned the right to play the grand final at home. Would you be able to get more people in Brisbane, in Melbourne? Would you be able to get maybe fans of the other teams that they're not going to schlep to Brisbane to see not their team, but I'm sure you'd have a lot that would come just to see the AFLW grand final. With that being said, Melbourne didn't earn it. They didn't earn the right to host the grand final. Brisbane did. So I'm okay with it insofar as that this is the best situation, but I think the people shouldn't be upset at the Lions for choosing this as their venue. They should be upset that, again, this is another situation where the AFL looks like they don't have a vision and they don't really care as much about the AFLW competition as they should. And that is why we are where we are. So don't get pissed off at the Lions, get pissed off at the AFLW.
Yeah, and this is also one of those where it's like, and you and I both watch it too. I think the Cricket World Cup didn't help either because it took away some of the venues that were possible. Because the GABA, the Cricket World Cup, and some of the cricket there is the reason that the GABA is unavailable. The Metricon Stadium, Rolling Stones are there. That's literally the reason why they couldn't have the game there is because the Rolling Stones had scheduled it. Again, you would think that if the AFLW would move it up, they would look to go, hey, Brisbane's a good team. They might be here. We need to see when the grand final would be to make sure that if Metricon is available, at least then we get a big stadium in Queensland for the grand final. I agree with you. I think the AFLW schedule. I think the AFLW slapped this together. They wanted to get it early, and they kind of just went, well, we'll just deal with it. And it's blowing up in their faces. And again, is this perfect? No. I mean, there's never, unfortunately, with the Australian sports calendar, there is no perfect time for the women. There isn't. I'm sorry. I will look at anybody and you can clip this, the people that are watching this. There is no perfect time. You can't do it at the same time as the men because then it's going to be looked as the redheaded stepchild. It's going to get less coverage than it already does. I understand. I keep seeing this all the time. Everybody going, you should just play it as curtain raisers. No,
No, no,
no, no,
no,
no. It
no.
will not change anything. In fact, it will actually regress the competition, in my opinion. And I know some of the women have even said that. If you look at the coverage that they get now, if you think it's going to improve with them playing curtain raisers, you are mistaken. Yes, I'm an
Mm-hmm.
American, but I seen this. And the other thing that you got to look at it is, and this is, I see this all the time. The AFLW fan base and the AFL men's fan base are two completely different groups.
Yes.
We're not getting a ton of the men's supporters over to the women's. You're not. You're going to have to build that. Many of them are still don't arguing the women's competition. The reasons I'm not going to even give them gas. I'm not. So this is one of those where you have to understand these are two completely different competitions. They're both under the AFL umbrella, but they are two completely different competitions with completely different fan bases and completely different thought processes of how this is going. It's never going to be perfect. You're going to have to work it out. Okay. The
Yeah.
MCG is not an option for a grand final. It's not. The GABA will not be. The SCG, Optus Stadium, and Adelaide Oval, unfortunately, with the way this is, cricket season will cake those out. But if you can keep Metricon, if you can keep Giant Stadium, if you GMHBA, in my opinion, might even be the best one in Victoria. If there's no cricket there,
Mm-hmm.
play it there.
And
South
there
Australia.
usually isn't.
Exactly. And South Australia, I mean, Norwood Oval will have to work. And then
Yeah.
Optus, unfortunately, with Optus not being an option, I'm not sure. Would you use Fremantle over? Would you use Mineral Resources Park? That's the biggest question there. So they're going to have to figure this out unless they have specifically make a deal with, say, the MCG, SCG, GABA to be like, hey, there's going to be no cricket here because this is where the grand finals and schedule it beforehand, almost like the MCG. We know that the grand final is going to be here. Play it at Sydney at the SCG. I know they may not get there, but just schedule it there. So then you
Yeah.
know. Tell the Sixers and the Thunder you're going to be playing road games for the first month of the season till you can get that grand final in, then you can get the pitch in, so on and so forth. I know it's crazy, but these are ideas that are going to have to be implemented. Eventually, I think this should be a one, they should pick a place and have it be permanent.
Yeah.
I understand that because this is going to continue to happen. because concerts are going to be scheduled. The cricket's going to go. I mean, there's no avoiding the cricket. It's going to happen.
Yeah.
So, so we'll have to see. Again, Springfield, I think will be fine. I'm really not that worried about it. I think it's a storm in a teacup in this particular opinion. You ran into a crap year, okay? World Cup, you moved everything up early. You're gonna go through headaches. I'm hoping that this is a 1 year thing. I'm not holding my breath, but I'm hoping this is a 1 year stuff up that they just threw it together. We'll figure it out. We'll take a deep breath and we'll be able to fix the issues next season. So
Yeah.
I'm hoping. I really,
Yeah.
really am hoping. And you and I are both on this. We're huge allies in the women's sports here.
Yeah.
These women deserve to play at the best possible places they can so then their skill can be shown. Okay.
Yeah.
Go
Go.
ahead.
I'm sorry. I was
No, no,
going to
you're
say
good.
here's the thing. You hit it right on the head. The reason you and I are kvetching about this is not because we're being mean and we're trolling and we're doing all this other stuff. We have an investment in the women's game, not just as fans, but as people who we're in the media basically,
Mhm.
professional or otherwise. We're in the media. We are talking this up because we have an investment not only emotionally, but we both work with footballers, with women footballers who may very well one day be in this pipeline. I mean, I've worked with Danny Marshall. You've been a part of the league where Danny Marshall played. They have all these other women who have in the past gone and played at the state level. Do I think Nicole Livingston is trying to do all of this? And do I think all the other people? I think they are trying to do a lot of this in good faith. There is a lot of really I hate this term, but I have to say it. There's a lot of bad optics here.
Mhm.
There is a lot of awful optics. Now, next season, like I said, I I this season shouldn't have even been played now. It's done now. We got the grand final coming up. It's now it is. How the league responds and how they plan next season will show me a great deal insofar as how much they truly, truly care about the vision and about growing this team, this competition, and about how much they truly care about this women's competition. Are they genuinely making an effort to do this? Are they going to sit down and plan? If they do, and they come out and they come back and say, okay, we have this plan and this is what our plan is going to be, then absolutely, I think that will show me that they do care and that they do want to do that. If they don't, if they fly by the seat of their pants next year after all the crap that's happened this year and about
Mhm.
all the other stuff, then I think there needs to be some serious conversations about, is the AFL, and I hate to put it this way, is the AFL a suitable steward for growing this game? They themselves have taken it on, and I won't go into the international game. That's a tangent for another day. But the AFL, when the AFL has appointed itself and anointed itself as a steward of everything that has to do with the game, including the women's game. So I realize, a lot of it is business motivated. I understand that, especially, we're coming out of a pandemic, the resources are relatively limited. But but like, what are we doing here? Like, are you going to, the men do not have to worry about this. And I don't care about the men. The men had to do this at the very beginning, and the men had to deal with all this. Yeah, well, it's 2022 and the league is
Mhm.
being bankrolled by a multi-million-dollar entity, and that has the resources to do this and has the resources irrespective of the limitations that this time of the season is. And I'm with you 100%. It's really, really difficult to shoehorn this season in with, you can't have it. I mean, you can't have it during the summer. Forget cricket. It's 90, 100 degrees out. Sorry for the Fahrenheit. 90, 100 degrees out. We've seen this in January. I mean, listen, you've coached and you've played in the dead of summer. I don't I
Hmm.
mean, and we did that without pay, without getting paid. You
Hmm.
know, these women are getting paid. These women, I mean, this is their livelihoods. This is them going out there and doing this. And you hit the nail on the head insofar as saying, you know, they're two completely different fan bases. They're two completely different audiences. You know, there was somebody who was involved in the sport trying to tell me, oh, the women should be glad that they should be playing the grand final, the women's grand final, as the curtain raiser to the men's grand final. No, they shouldn't. Like, no one is going to come and watch two teams that they have no investment in. Can you imagine, like, if what the West Coast Eagles, you think they're going to come, they're going to, you know, let's say the West Coast Eagles make the men's grand final. You think they're going to come and watch Melbourne and North Melbourne in the women's grand final? Do you think they're going to get into the stadium for? No, it's not. Well, even if they get 10% of the, no, nobody. It's a stupid idea and it shouldn't even be considered.
Hmm.
But this is going to tell me a lot. How they handle the situation going forward is going to tell me a lot about how much the AFL cares about running a women's competition. And it impacts everybody. It impacts the women, the athletes. It impacts the support staffs. It impacts the fans. And frankly, they need to do everything they can to appease the fans at this point. So that's I'll end on that.
I absolutely love it. And in the perfect example to back up what you just said was, I felt horrible for the North Melbourne fans when they scheduled the North Melbourne game before the
It's
preliminary final with
atrocious.
Sydney. And it was like everybody was like, this is a great opportunity for the women. It was like, did you see that there was only like five? Like, I felt bad for the North Melbourne fans because it was like, you had to buy a ticket to a preliminary final game that you have no interest in. You're not going to want to watch Sydney and Melbourne in a men's game. Why?
No,
Why would you spend $100 when you really only want to watch the $10 a ticket regular price game between your team and Melbourne in a second round in a round two game? Like, I understood. I understood that they were trying to get them on the MCG, which I appreciate that. It was almost a slap in the face to the North Melbourne team, because it was like, I almost was it would have almost been better if they would have went, hey Sydney, can we switch your schedule just this one time? You play Melbourne, so then the two teams with their fan bases that are going to be in the preliminary final play here. That would have made more sense. It would have been a logistical nightmare, but it would have made more sense. So
yeah,
100% agree with you. I think this is one of those, they need to listen to the fans as much as possible. This has to be fixed.
yeah,
I'm crossing my fingers. I'm putting, again, I'm going to put enough rope to hang myself by giving them the benefit of the doubt that it was a moved up season. I'm hoping. I hope they don't hang me. I really, really hope they do not hang me on this. I hope that next year is much better, but I'm not going to hold my breath. I'm unfortunately been burned far too many times. So we, I don't want to, I don't really want to put a lot of, there's one other fiasco that went through the week. And honestly, I think it's ridiculous. The writing on Jess Hoskins or Sarah, I apologize to the Hosking sisters if you actually do see this. You two are incredible players, but I didn't catch which one had the wording on their shoulder tape. I'm
it was
Was this
Jess.
really a big deal? Was this really? I think this is way overblown. I think this is, if this was a men's game, they would have just went, that's pretty aggressive, and they would have just said nothing. But it's two women. It's a women's player, and oh my god, they lost their friggin' minds.
Yeah, I this is one of those where it's like I almost feel like this is, won't someone please think of the children? You know, we had a, here's what I'll say. We had a situation arise in a USAFL game earlier where there was a member of a support staff who yelled at a female player to run over that and the word that was used in this, and and there was a complaint and whatnot. I I listen. I personally don't have any issue with it. I'm with you. I think it is completely overblown. I can see where, especially. I mean, look, it's not a nice word. It's not a word. I listen. It's
They
a
were
word
two
that I'm.
words put together. I'm not going to utter them again.
Yes,
I'm not going to. But it's just I'm just
we.
like I
If you know, you
understand.
know.
I understand why some people could potentially be, but it's like, really, come on. It's like
Yeah,
there are much worse things thrown out there. I mean, when we call players soldiers, which I think is a way overblown
uh,
use of a word that I think is just it's not even close to true. I really detest that use because you are not a soldier, you're an athlete. It is a
no,
completely different atmosphere. Yes, you may be going into a gladiatorial sport, but you are not in any way a soldier or a
yeah.
gladiator.
You're not
It
going into
no,
war.
no.
No,
So
no.
I just is it a competition? Is it a test of one's will against another? Yes, but it was. I just think this was blown out of proportion because of it being in a women's game. I
Yeah,
purely and simply it. I don't condone it being written, but I just think it's one of those. It's just like walk up to her, tell her to take the tape off, and just
yeah,
don't make a big deal. Like it was
yeah.
way
I
the please explain was just ridiculous. Just have an AFL official go to her at quarter time and go, hey, could you take that off just so
yeah.
we don't have to worry about it. Like
Yeah, and it's not on TV and it's not all this other
exactly. I'm
stuff.
like
I
it
mean,
could have so just so ridiculous in my opinion. Again,
yeah, I mean, I get it, and I get it. You know, especially when you have, you know, and you've got kids there and everything, and I can understand that. You've got kids watching on TV, but yeah, I mean, it's something that I probably, if I'm coaching, is it something that that in the USAFL I probably do? You know, as a coach, do I probably say something? I probably as a coach don't say anything. As maybe a league administrator, maybe I say something. If it's something that has to do with kids, again, that's probably a little bit much. But I think the furor I think is a little bit overblown. But
yeah.
I can understand why. I can understand the action being taken. But anyway, I think that's
I
enough
think this
about
is one
that.
of the I think it's one of those a simple hey could you tape over that please. AFL official could have solved the problem before it even became what it was. So again to the Hosking, I think it was Sarah.
No, it was
I
Jess.
it was Jess.
It was
Okay.
Jess.
Yeah. So it's like
I googled it.
just yeah, just tell her to put a little tape over. We won't have to worry about it. But whatever. So alrighty. So we've been through the fiascos. We've been through the drama. We get to it again. One game to tip, and it's it, and it's the biggie. We talked our intangible. We talked our offense, defense, how we like it. I gotta ask, who's coming home with the flag? Brisbane, Melbourne.
Melbourne by 10. That's my tip. I think they're hungry. I think Melbourne Daisy Pierce is not getting any younger. We know that. We know that some of these players, I think, are, you know, I think, you know, a lot of the players that have been around a long time, you know, like Paxman and them, and they're knowing that they're not going to be around forever, and that, you know, they're still performing at a high level. But at the same time, it's going to get to the point where, I mean, they've been trying to get to this point for a long time. I think as well as the Lions have played and as talented as they are, I think it does come down to some of these intangibles. I think the unfamiliarity of the ground is going to come into play. As you mentioned, this is brand new turf. You know, the Lions do have the ability to practice on said turf a little bit more, so they're, I guess, a little bit more familiar with it. But I also feel that this is because neither team has played here before. I feel like that kind of nullifies things to an extent. I think the Demons win this one again. I think it'll be less than 2 goals, and I think it'll be close until maybe midway through the third quarter, and then the Demons have a final kick.
Yeah, I think this is one of those. I've I looked at this game when I was doing my tipping for the bracket challenge, and I went, how does this one go? And I look at it, everybody was like, well, Brisbane beat him at Casey Field so that he would give them a massive, yeah, but Taylor Harris didn't play and Liv Purcell didn't play. Those are two big
Yeah,
cogs in this Melbourne team. And I just I don't think Brisbane's got that player that if Taylor Harris just plays forward, so if they were to shift Eden Zanka in to save her shoulder, Kate Ludkins is a great player, but I don't can Kate stay with Taylor Harris if Taylor Harris goes
right,
forward? Can she jump with Taylor Harris? Because if Taylor can catch and with her ability to kick, that will only open up more because if Ludkins takes Taylor Harris, okay, now who takes Kate Hoare? Now who
right,
takes Daisy Pierce? Who takes Eden Zanka when she does go forward? Who takes Lauren Pierce when Lauren Pierce pushes forward? I just think it gives some matchup issues that if Melbourne can supply its forward line, can make it a long day. I think the physicality of Melbourne, especially after a game against North that really tested them. I think they've played in closer games. So
hmm
I think they're a little more battle tested. I think Melbourne
right,
wins this. I agree. I think it's less than 2 goals. I think it's 8 max. This is a game. It's going to be played in an elevator when it comes to scores. I don't think it's going to get more than 8 either way. I think this is
right,
always going to be a close game. This could be one of those where if one team can kick 2 goals in a row, that's really going to give them a ton of momentum. And as we kind of said, I think the ruck battle, I think, can give Melbourne first footy, which then makes the Lions play D, which they don't, which they're much stronger when they can tackle and they're the aggressor. If they have to play defensively, I think it throws their game off a little bit. So I
right.
like the D's in this one. It's hard to beat a team twice in one year. I know
Yeah,
it's in Springfield. I know it's a home game, but that also brings pressure. Does this Lions team now with a much bigger audience, do they feel the pressure of having to win at home as well? So I like the D's in this one. This is going to be a fantastic game. Cannot wait for it. An interesting time slot, shall we say, but we won't go into that again. But I have to admit, it's a nice time slot for me here in the Central. I think it's 10:40 for you out there. It's 9:40
yeah.
for me on a Saturday evening. I'll get my college football in, and then I get footy grand final women's. So it is going to be a magnificent Saturday, especially after, as you and I both know, being here in the States, a Thanksgiving weekend. So we'll have plenty of footy and football to watch, especially
Footy, football, and football, as it
football.
turns out. If you hey, listen, if you like kicking a air-filled spheroid or some sort of conveyance, this is the weekend for you. Uh, that sort of thing. No, I think I think it'll be fun. Listen, these games are always a lot of fun. I wish it's going to hopefully get to the point where these games have the build up and the pomp and the circumstance that the grand final does, that the the men's grand final does, and it'll get there. I think it does. I think that's the one advantage to having it in a static location every year is that you know where the game's going to be, so there is that that tradition and everything that goes with like the grand final parade and the breakfast and everything like that. But these games are always fun. I think it'll be a fantastic. I think it'll be a fantastic game no matter what happens. I think I think this season, for all of the crap that's happened and the circumstances in which this season has occurred, I think you know we got to watch another 11 another what was it 13 weeks of footy, and now there's no excuse. Everybody has a if you barrack for a team, you've got a women's counterpart. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. But like I said, it's like you said, it'll be if you're here in the States, if you're in Australia, obviously you'll be able to watch it. If you're here in the States, um, you know, if I get around somebody who's got a watch AFL subscription, because it'll be a good one.
Yep, for sure. Two Champagne football teams. This will be the best AFL game, I think, of the season. I think this could be game of the year for sure. So, ladies and gentlemen, that is going to do it for our podcast again. The, so much to talk about. An incredible season, and this is, I think, this is the perfect cap to it. Brisbane, Melbourne, absolutely fantastic. Cannot wait for it. That is going to do it for our episode today. We will have one more AFLW round review left, the grand final and season review. Cannot wait for that. A very special guest of the very special friend of the podcast will be coming on as my co-host for that. Cannot wait for it. Brian, decompress, sir. Enjoy your Thanksgiving holiday. I know that you've got plenty of football, plenty of footy, and plenty of football to watch this season. Enjoy it, sir. Enjoy your family. Please wish them a wonderful Thanksgiving for me, sir.
Thanks, Donnie, and to all of you out there, happy Thanksgiving, a happy holiday season, and to all of you in Australia, happy Thursday.
Love it. That is going to do it for us. We will be back again next week. Have a wonderful, wonderful week.